The Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountain range in North America, stretching 1,864 miles from Canada to Alabama. Millions of tourists walk its trails every year, admiring the majestic views and pristine forests. Most return home with photographs and memories, but some never return at all. On the 3rd of November 2023, experienced hiker Sarah Kowalski set out on a familiar route and disappeared, leaving behind only her backpack on an inaccessible rock. On the 15th of September 2024, biologist James McNeil set out to study bears in the infamous Bennington Triangle and disappeared for 31 days, returning with no memory of what had happened. On the 22nd of April 2013, student Olivia Hart walked 65 feet away from her friends to take a photo and disappeared in 30 seconds in front of witnesses. 3 different people, 3 different places, 3 stories united by one thing. The mountains took them, and not all of them came back alive. These are not urban legends or fabrications. These are real cases recorded by search and rescue services, documented by detectives, and mourned by families. Cases that make you wonder, how well do we know the wilderness we consider safe? And what happens to people when they cross the invisible line between civilization and the primeval wilderness? On the 22nd of April 2013, 19-year-old student Olivia Hart set out on a hike along one of the most popular trails in Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. The 5.5-mile Alum Cave Trail welcomes hundreds of hikers every day, is well marked, and is considered relatively safe. No one could have imagined that this ordinary spring day would end in tragedy, shocking the local community and leaving many questions unanswered. Olivia was a sophomore at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, studying environmental science. She was an active, athletic girl who enjoyed photography and often spent her weekends hiking in the surrounding mountains. That Monday, taking advantage of spring break, she organized a hike with 3 college friends: Brandon Cole, 20, Ashley Dixon, 19, and Mark Thompson, 21. The group registered at the park entrance at 8:15 a.m. Ranger Daniel Wilson, who checked them in, later recalled that all 4 were in good spirits, had the appropriate equipment, and had experience with day hikes. The weather was perfect, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, with excellent visibility. The group began their ascent around 9 a.m., planning to reach the Inspiration Point Overlook, located at an elevation of 4,600 feet, and then return before sunset. According to her friend's testimony, the first half of the hike went smoothly. They stopped to take photos, snacked along the way, and reached the lookout point at around 1:50 p.m. There were several other groups of tourists at Inspiration Point, which is normal for this popular spot. Olivia's friends decided to take a lunch break. Brandon Cole described the moment of her disappearance to detectives as follows. "We were sitting on a bench, taking out our sandwiches. Olivia said she wanted to take a photo of the valley from a different angle. She took her phone and walked about 100 feet to our left, to the edge of the observation deck where there were fewer people." Ashley Dixon added, "I saw her standing there, raising her phone, taking a few pictures. Then I turned away to get water from my backpack. Maybe half a minute passed. We heard a sound, not a scream, more like a surprised exclamation. When I turned around, Olivia was gone." All 3 friends immediately ran to where Olivia had been standing. Her phone was lying on the ground. Mark Thompson was the first to notice that 10 feet from the edge of the clearing, there was a steep slope covered with thick bushes and trees. "We immediately realized that she could have slipped and fallen. The edge is steep there, and below it there is a very steep descent of 65 feet, he later pointed out. Her friends began calling out to Olivia and climbed down a few feet down the slope, trying to see or hear her. Brandon immediately called the park's rescue service. The time was 1:59 p.m. No more than 2 or 3 minutes had passed since Olivia's disappearance. The first group of rangers arrived on the scene 18 minutes later. Captain Robert Jackson, the park's search and rescue coordinator, immediately assessed the situation. The steep slope below the observation deck was covered with dense vegetation, with protruding rocks and deep crevices. This is a scenario we've seen before. A person gets too close to the edge, loses their balance, and falls. The slope is so steep that you can slide down a considerable distance, he explained to reporters the next day. By 3 p.m., 24 rescuers, including canine teams, were working at the site. The dogs picked up Olivia's phone signal and pointed down the slope, confirming the fall hypothesis. The team of climbers began to methodically comb the hill, checking every crevice and every patch of dense vegetation where the fallen girl could have gotten stuck. By nightfall, the first day of searching had yielded no results. A team remained on duty overnight, periodically calling out Olivia's name on a megaphone and listening for sounds on the slope. Olivia's family, her parents, David and Sandra Hart, and her younger brother Ethan, arrived from Nashville late in the evening. On the morning of the 23rd of April, the search operation was expanded. Teams from neighboring counties, volunteers from local mountaineering clubs, and additional canine units joined the effort. In total, more than 120 people participated in the operation. A helicopter equipped with thermal imaging equipment flew over the area, trying to detect a heat signature. On the second day, the search was expanded to a radius of 1 mile from the point of disappearance. The possibility was considered that Olivia, after waking up after the fall, could have become disoriented and gone in the wrong direction. All trails, streams, caves, and abandoned buildings in the area were checked. On the third day, divers joined the operation to check mountain streams and small bodies of water. Diving instructor Thomas Rivera noted, "The mountain streams here are fast and cold. If a person fell into the water unconscious, the current could have carried the body a considerable distance." Local media actively covered the story. A photo of a smiling Olivia appeared on the front pages of newspapers across the state. The family held a press conference begging anyone who might have seen or heard anything to come forward. A reward of $15,000 was offered. As days turned into weeks, Detective Lisa Carter of the Sevier County Sheriff's Office, assigned as the lead investigator, considered various scenarios. The first and most likely was an accident. Olivia slipped, fell down the slope, was injured, and may have been unconscious or disoriented. However, an extensive search failed to locate her body. The second theory was third-party involvement. Detective Carter checked all the people who were at the observation deck at the time of the disappearance. 14 people from other tour groups were interviewed. All of them stated that they had not noticed anything suspicious. Surveillance cameras at the park entrances were analyzed, but no suspicious individuals or vehicles were identified. The third, unlikely version is voluntary disappearance. However, this hypothesis was quickly rejected. Olivia had no motive to disappear. She was a good student, had close relationships with her family and friends, and had no financial problems or debts. Her bank cards and phone were not used after her disappearance. On the 16th day of the search, the 7th of May, the active phase of the operation was officially concluded. An area of 30 square miles was thoroughly combed by more than 400 volunteers and professionals. Captain Jackson stated, "We did everything we could. Searches of this scale are rare even for national parks. Unfortunately, sometimes nature takes people and does not give them back right away." On the 3rd of June 2013, 42 days after Olivia's disappearance, a couple of tourists from Georgia, Kenneth and Jennifer Morris, were hiking in a remote area of the park 7 miles from the point of disappearance. The route ran along a small stream at an altitude of 6,300 feet. Kenneth Morris noticed something unusual on a flat boulder in the middle of the stream. As he got closer, he realized with horror that it was a body. He immediately called emergency services. By 2 p.m., an investigation team was working at the site. The body was identified as Olivia Hart. She was lying on her back on the boulder, wearing the same clothes she had worn when she left on her hike. Her clothes were relatively clean, although damp from the stream spray. There were no visible injuries consistent with prolonged exposure to the elements. The body was taken to the Sevier County morgue for an autopsy. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Margaret Lewis conducted a detailed examination. The preliminary report indicated the cause of death as cardiac arrest. Olivia had no external injuries incompatible with life, no fractures of the skull or spine, and no internal bleeding. The most puzzling aspect was the condition of the body. Dr. Lewis noted in her report, The degree of decomposition is inconsistent with the expected time frame of 42 days. The body is in a condition more consistent with recent death. However, she acknowledged that cold mountain water and other environmental factors could have significantly slowed the decomposition process. Toxicological analysis revealed no narcotics, alcohol, or poisons in the body. Analysis of the stomach contents showed remnants of food that Olivia had eaten on the morning of her disappearance. The girl had no known heart disease or pathology that could explain sudden cardiac arrest. Cardiologist Dr. James Warren, who consulted with investigators, explained, "In young people, cardiac arrest can occur due to undiagnosed genetic abnormalities such as long QT syndrome or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Such cases are rare, but not unprecedented. Extreme stress, hypothermia, exhaustion, all of these could have triggered fatal arrhythmia in a predisposed person." Detective Carter attempted to reconstruct the sequence of events. The most likely scenario: Olivia slipped and fell from the observation deck, slid down a steep slope, and lost consciousness. When she woke up, possibly with a concussion, and disoriented, she started moving in the wrong direction, going deeper into the forest instead of climbing back up to the trail. In a state of shock and disorientation, Olivia could have traveled a considerable distance over several days, feeding on berries and water from streams. Cold nights, exhaustion, and stress weakened her body. At some point, when she reached a stream, she lay down on a boulder and lost consciousness. The combination of hypothermia, exhaustion, and an undiagnosed heart condition led to cardiac arrest. This version explained most of the facts, although it left some questions unanswered. Why didn't the search dogs find her trail? Captain Jackson explained, "If a person walks through water and there are many streams here, it interrupts the scent trail. Dogs can lose their direction." Olivia Hart's funeral was held on the 12th of June in Nashville. Hundreds of people, family, friends, classmates, strangers moved by her story came to say goodbye. Her ecology professor gave a eulogy in which he spoke of her passion for nature and her dreams of a career as an environmental researcher. The Hart family established the Olivia Hart Scholarship at the University of Tennessee for students studying environmental conservation. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park Administration installed additional warning signs at the Inspiration Point overlook and reinforced fencing in dangerous areas. Olivia Hart's story serves as a reminder that even on popular, well-maintained trails, nature remains an unpredictable force. One wrong step, one moment of inattention, and life can be cut short. The mountains do not forgive mistakes, even the smallest ones. On the 15th of September 2024, 52-year-old biologist James McNeil set out on a scientific expedition to the forest near Glastonbury Mountain in Vermont. This region, known as the Bennington Triangle, had a grim reputation. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people disappeared without a trace here. McNeil, a black bear population specialist with 30 years of experience, knew about these stories, but treated them as urban legends with no scientific basis. McNeil was contracted by the Vermont Department of Natural Resources to conduct annual monitoring of the black bear population in the Green Mountain National Forest. His task was to fit GPS collars on several individuals, collect hair samples, and conduct a visual assessment of the population's condition. On Saturday morning, the 15th of September, he checked in at the Forest Service checkpoint at 7:45 a.m., reporting his planned route and estimated time of return, 8 p.m. that same day. The last radio contact with base camp was at 11:23 a.m. McNeil informed coordinator Susan Collins that he was moving along the northern slope and planned to check an area where bear activity had previously been recorded. The communication was clear and uninterrupted. No further messages were received from James. By 9 p.m., when McNeil had not made his scheduled communication and had not returned by the control time, Coordinator Collins contacted the Bennington County Sheriff's Office. At 8:30 p.m., the search and rescue service was activated. At 6 a.m. on the 16th of September, a full-scale search operation began. Captain David Harrison of the Vermont Search and Rescue Service led a team of 48 people, including rangers, volunteers, and 3 canine units. A helicopter equipped with thermal imaging equipment was brought in to assist with the operation. The search was complicated by the rugged terrain, dense forests, steep slopes, numerous ravines, and rocky areas. The weather remained stable, 46.4 degrees Fahrenheit at night, 62.6 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, with no precipitation, which gave hope for a successful outcome. On the second day of the search, the 17th of September, the dogs picked up McNeil's trail and led rescuers to a small clearing 2.5 miles from the point of last radio contact. In the clearing, about 60 feet in diameter, they found signs of human presence: trampled grass, the remains of an energy bar, and a broken branch that could have been used as a walking stick. However, McNeil himself was not there. The search dogs were unable to continue the trail beyond the clearing. McNeil had probably changed direction, or the trail had been washed away by the brief rain that had fallen the day before, which local residents reported at around 2 p.m. The team expanded the search radius to 6 miles. By the 5th day of the search, it became clear that McNeil was either seriously injured and unable to signal for help, or had strayed significantly from his intended route. Captain Harrison requested additional resources. Teams from neighboring counties and volunteers from the New England Mountain Rescue Association joined the operation. McNeil's family, his wife Deborah, and 2 adult sons, arrived in Bennington and set up their own coordination point for volunteers. Deborah gave an interview to the local newspaper, the Bennington Banner, in which she described her husband as a highly experienced field researcher who never got lost and always followed safety protocols. On the 8th day of the search, the team surveyed abandoned logging roads and old hunting cabins within a 12.5-mile radius. There were several such semi-abandoned structures in the region, left over from the mid-20th century when logging was active. The search yielded no results. By the 14th day, the active phase of the search was officially over. Captain Harrison said at a press conference, "We combed through 186 square miles of territory. We used all available resources. Unfortunately, Mr. McNeil has not been found. The case is being reclassified as a long-term investigation, but we will continue to respond to any leads." On the 16th of October, 2024, exactly 31 days after his disappearance, Hunter Robert Hansen from Keene, New Hampshire, found James McNeil in a forest 33 miles east of the place where he disappeared. Hansen, who was checking his hunting grounds before the opening of deer season, noticed a man sitting under a fir tree near a forest road. McNeil was alive but severely malnourished. Hansen immediately called an ambulance. James was taken to Elliott Hospital in Manchester, New Hampshire. A medical examination revealed moderate dehydration, a weight loss of 40 pounds, multiple abrasions and scratches on his arms and legs, and signs of hypothermia. Surprisingly, he had no serious injuries that could explain his inability to return on his own. A detective from the Bennington County Sheriff's Office conducted a series of interviews with McNeil at the hospital. The biologist's testimony was fragmentary and at times contradictory, which doctors attributed to the effects of prolonged stress and exhaustion. According to McNeil, on the day of his disappearance, he was following his planned route. He decided to check a remote area where he had previously installed cameras to observe wildlife. Descending a steep slope, he slipped on wet rocks and fell, rolling down several feet. He hit his head on a tree and lost consciousness. When James regained consciousness, several hours later, he estimated, it was already dark. He tried to get up but felt dizzy and nauseous, classic symptoms of a concussion. His radio had been damaged in the fall, and his backpack was stuck between rocks higher up the slope. James spent the night in a small crevice between the rocks, trying to stay warm. The following days became a blur. McNeil described periods of confused consciousness as he wandered through the forest, trying to find a road or a river that might lead him to civilization. He drank water from streams and tried to find edible plants that he knew as a biologist and berries, even though September was already late in the season for them. Several times he found abandoned logging roads, but they were lost in the undergrowth. Neurologist Dr. Christopher Lane, who examined McNeil, explained, "The patient suffered a moderate traumatic brain injury. Such injuries often cause memory impairment, especially in the acute phase. The combination of trauma, exhaustion, dehydration, and stress could have led to periods of disorientation and confusion. This explains why Mr. McNeil was unable to navigate effectively and moved erratically. Several mysteries remain. How did an experienced biologist walk 33 miles through rough terrain while disoriented? Detective O'Connor suggested that McNeil may have been following old logging roads that stretched through the forests of Vermont and New Hampshire, crossing state lines. In his confused state, he could have walked for days without realizing the distance. Why didn't the search parties find him? Captain Harrison explained, "If a person keeps moving, especially in an unexpected direction, it is extremely difficult to find them. We concentrated our search within a 12.5-mile radius, assuming that an injured person could not go further. But if Mr. McNeil continued eastward, he quickly left our search area." James McNeil spent 12 days in the hospital recovering physically. However, the psychological consequences were more profound. He gave up field work and 3 months later resigned from the Department of Conservation to take up a teaching position at a local college. In an interview 6 months after the incident, McNeil said, "I have devoted 30 years to working in the wilderness. I thought I knew the woods, understood the risks, but one mistake, one wrong step, and everything can change in a second. I'm grateful to be alive, but I lost something in those woods, the confidence I need for this job." James McNeil's story added another case to the long list of incidents in the Bennington Triangle. Unlike the 5 people who disappeared in the 1940s and were never found, McNeil survived. His case shows how easily even an experienced specialist can get into trouble in these ancient, unforgiving mountains, where nature does not forgive mistakes. On the 3rd of November 2023, 27-year-old Sarah Kowalski set out on a solo hike along the Blue Ridge Parkway, a route she knew by heart. An experienced hiker and licensed mountain guide, she had spent the last 5 years working in the Great Smoky Mountains region of North Carolina, leading groups on the most challenging trails. That Thursday morning seemed like any other. Nothing foreshadowed the tragedy that would unfold in the days to come. Kowalski checked in at the state park entrance at 7:20 a.m. Ranger Thomas Kincaid, who took her route sheet, later recalled that Kowalski was in good spirits. She reported her plans: a route to the summit of Callaway Peak via the eastern ridge, with an estimated return time of 6 p.m. The weather promised to be ideal: 57.2 degrees Fahrenheit, variable cloudiness, good visibility. Sarah took standard equipment: a backpack with water, snacks, a first aid kit, a GPS navigator, and a cell phone. Her sister Emily, who lives in Raleigh, received a routine text message around noon. "Everything is great, the views are amazing." That was the last word from Sarah. When she did not contact them or return by the check-in time at 9 p.m., her family became concerned. At 10 p.m., an official missing person report was filed with the Avery County Sheriff's Office. At 6 a.m. on the 4th of November, the official search began. A team of 42 people, including park rangers, volunteers from the local search and rescue service, and 3 dog handlers with trained dogs, began combing the area. Captain Michael Jensen, a veteran with 20 years of mountain rescue experience, was appointed to coordinate the operation. The first day of searching yielded no results. The dogs were able to pick up a scent from Sarah's last GPS location, 2 miles from the summit on the main trail, but then lost it at a fork where the trail split in 2 directions. This was strange, but not unprecedented. In the mountains of North Carolina, dense foliage, rocky soil, and frequent rains regularly hamper the work of search dogs. There had been a brief rain shower in the previous 48 hours, which could have washed away the scent trail. Sarah's family arrived at the search site by the evening of the first day. Her father, Robert Kowalski, a former military man, insisted on expanding the search area. Sarah knows these mountains. If she hasn't returned, something has gone wrong. She could have been injured or fallen off a cliff. "We need to check the ravines and hard-to-reach areas," he told reporters from a local newspaper. By the 5th day of the search, more than 120 people were involved in the operation. A rescue helicopter joined the search, flying over the area with thermal imaging equipment. Volunteers from neighboring counties joined in combing the forest. Sarah's friends and colleagues organized their own search party of 25 people. other guides, and experienced hikers who knew the region. However, the weather began to deteriorate. Forecasters warned of an approaching cold front. The temperature dropped to 32 degrees Fahrenheit at night. If Sarah were injured and without shelter, her chances of survival were rapidly diminishing with each passing hour. Captain Jensen expanded the search area to a 9-mile radius, including remote areas not usually visited by hikers. On the 6th day, a search dog named Max, a Belgian shepherd with years of experience, found a clue 2.5 miles northwest of the main route. The dog led the guide to a small stream where a torn piece of khaki fabric was found on a rock, the same shade as the jacket Sarah's family said she had worn on the hike. The sample was sent for examination. On the 7th of November, exactly 4 days after the search began, a group of rescue climbers checking hard-to-reach rocky areas made a discovery that turned the investigation upside down. At an altitude of 5,400 feet, at the top of the sheer cliff of Eagle Rock, located 12 miles from Sarah's last known location, her backpack was found. The location immediately raised questions. Eagle Rock is a technical rock formation that requires special climbing equipment: ropes, carabiners, and belay systems. It is not a tourist route. Experienced climbers take 3 to 5 hours to ascend. Sarah did not have any climbing equipment with her, only a standard hiking backpack. How could she have gotten there? The backpack was thoroughly examined on site and then taken to a laboratory. Everything inside was neatly packed: spare clothes, an empty water bottle, energy bars, 2 of the 5 had been eaten, an untouched first aid kit, and a GPS navigator with the last recorded point at 3:42 p.m. on the 3rd of November, 2 miles from where the backpack was found. Sarah's phone was also in the backpack, dead. Her hiking boots were standing next to the backpack. This detail particularly puzzled investigators. The shoes were relatively clean, although they showed signs of wear. Forensic experts noted the absence of significant dirt that would be expected after a 7-mile hike across rough terrain. Detective Laura McGregor of the Avery County Sheriff's Office, assigned as the lead investigator in the case, began to consider various versions of what had happened. The first and most obvious was an accident. Sarah could have strayed from the trail, been injured, and possibly become disoriented. However, this did not explain how her backpack ended up on an inaccessible rock. The second theory was third-party involvement. There had been cases of attacks on lone hikers in the region, albeit rare. Detective McGregor requested information on all violent crimes reported within a 62-mile radius over the past 5 years. The alibis of several individuals who had previously been convicted of crimes against the person and lived in the area were checked. Jason Turner, Sarah's ex-boyfriend, whom she had broken up with 6 months before her disappearance, was questioned. According to him, the breakup was mutual and amicable. At the time of Sarah's disappearance, he was at work in Charlotte, 112 miles from the scene, as confirmed by his colleagues and CCTV footage from his workplace. The third, more disturbing version is that she disappeared voluntarily. Detective McGregor conducted a series of interviews with Sarah's friends, colleagues, and family members. The overall picture was consistent. Sarah loved her job, had a warm relationship with her family, and had no financial problems or debts. Her bank accounts showed no unusual activity in the weeks before her disappearance. However, Sarah's friend, Melissa Chen, mentioned that a month before her disappearance, Sarah had talked about the need for change and being tired of the routine. The discovery of the backpack gave the search a new direction. If Sarah somehow made it to Eagle Rock, she may have descended on the other side of the cliff or continued along the ridge. A group of climbers surveyed all accessible descent routes. Caves and crevices within a 3-mile radius of the backpack's location were checked. On the 9th day of the search, the 10th of November, divers joined the operation to check the deep mountain lake, Chris Creek, located a mile from Eagle Rock. The lake, up to 115 feet deep, had a reputation for being dangerous due to cold underwater currents and low visibility. A 4-day search of the bottom yielded no results. Local residents familiar with the region offered their own theories. Longtime resident Henry McDonald, who had lived in these mountains for 63 years, told of abandoned 19th century mines whose entrances were overgrown with forest and difficult to distinguish. Several such mines were discovered and surveyed. In one of them, 4 miles from Eagle Rock, traces of a relatively recent human presence were found: an extinguished campfire and food wrappers. However, analysis showed that the traces had been left several months earlier and were not related to Sarah. By the end of the second week, the Sarah Kowalski case had attracted the attention of the national media. Hundreds of calls came into the hotline. Most turned out to be false leads, people claiming to have seen a woman resembling Sarah in various cities from Atlanta to Washington. Each report was checked, but none were confirmed. Several people admitted to pranking and were fined for providing false information. Social media was filled with speculation. Conspiracy theorists offered theories ranging from alien abduction to secret government experiments. Sarah's family asked the public to focus on the facts and support the official search efforts. By the 21st of November, 18 days after Sarah's disappearance, the active phase of the search operation was officially over. More than 2,000 man-hours, 170 volunteers, and dozens of professional rescuers combed through 149 square miles of territory. No body or additional evidence was found. Captain Jensen said at a press conference, "We have done everything possible and will continue to follow up on any new leads. The case is now being treated as a long-term investigation. Ranger patrols will continue to monitor the area, but a massive search is no longer warranted without new information." Detective McGregor continued to work on the case but admitted, "This is one of the most mysterious cases of my career. It is physically impossible for a person without special equipment to climb that cliff, but the backpack is there. We have ruled out most of the usual scenarios. Only questions remain." Sarah Kowalski is officially listed as missing. Her case remains open in the National Crime Information Center database. The family has organized an annual memorial walk along the Blue Ridge Parkway, trails to raise funds for the region's search and rescue services. Park rangers have installed a small memorial plaque at the registration point where Sarah was last seen. It is engraved with the words, "In memory of Sarah Kowalski, an experienced guide who loved these mountains, missing since November 3rd, 2023. Sarah's story has become a warning even for experienced hikers. Mountains can be unpredictable. One mistake, one wrong turn, one underestimated danger, and a person can disappear, leaving behind only questions and grieving loved ones."